There's an interesting piece of physics involved in the sales of my book, which I want to show you. That we're not going to talk about the lone pair on water molecules just at the moment. That was another video I was going to plan on snowflakes, which I still might do, but not today. So we'll get rid of the chemistry and we'll focus on the physics. So I wanted to talk about sales, book sales. Now I know you're all going to leave the video now, and of course you're perfectly welcome to do that. But for those who've stayed behind, we're going to look at the physics of book sales. And so we have sales up the, we'll say, let's call that 10, we'll call that 20 books sold. And so we have my first book, which we'll just call Glassweaver. And then my second book was 4 Ages of Death, so we'll just call it 4 Ages. And then the next one was The Boy Who Built a Rocket Ship. We'll just call that Rocket Ship. And then the one I'm working on right now over there is currently called Heaven's Gates. Although I might need to have God in there somewhere. God's Gates. The Gates of God. Anyway, we'll just call it Gates. Nothing to do with Bill. And so here's the interesting physics that we are going to talk about. So Glassweaver's Tale, which was published in 2023, has sold about 20 copies to people who aren't me. If you look at the actual sales, it's about 38, but I think I bought about 18 of them. And 4 Ages has sold about 10 to people who weren't me. I think I've only bought 4 of those at full price. I bought some author copies, which you'll get to see because this relates to the physics. And then Rocket Ship has sold none. Now, this was out in 2024. Now, this was out in 2025. It's only had a couple of months. So maybe I'm being a little unfair, but you know, all of the sales of these 2 books happened within the first 2 months. And so I'm fairly certain that 20, 10 and 0 are accurate representations of what the sales are going to be. And so we now do some science. If we draw a line through the sales of these, we can extrapolate to what the sales of Heaven's Gate will be. And you can see it will be, just for the sake of argument, let's call it -10. I'm going to have -10 book sales of Heaven's Gate when I release it next year. And so then the question becomes, what is -10 books? And I pondered that for a while, and I was like, I looked up the Wikipedia entry for negative numbers, and it gave a lot of, you know, bosh and fluff about accounting and how, you know, it's essentially equivalent to debt. Now, obviously, you can't have a physical item that is a debt. That's a notional thing. And so it then struck me that what this must represent is a negative book. And so, all right, so what is a negative book? Well, there's only one thing a negative book can be, and that must be a book made of antimatter. I know it's reaching a bit, but I think that's right. So this is actually an anti-book. I will sell 10 anti-books. Now, obviously, it can't happen in this universe. It must happen in another universe. Perhaps the inverse, the mirror image of the... Would it be a mirror image? Well, it would be in the sense that everything that was negative would be positive and everything that was positive would be negative. Not a mirror image in the trivial sense of everything being reversed. You know, like in chemistry where you get stereo enantiomers. Enantiomers, that's right, yes. You know, where one molecule is the mirror image of another. It wouldn't be like that. This would be an antibook. And so then I was thinking, you could never bring together, if we say, here's the 4 Ages of Death. Oh dear, I hope we're still recording. It is the book. If this was Heaven's Gates, and then you had 4 Ages of Death. That's very awkward. I hate this. It's like some kind of puzzle. You couldn't bring them. You then have to be really careful. You couldn't bring them together. If this one is the anti-book, and then you were like to bring them together like this. Would they pull to it? Would they kind of be like magnets? Would it be like, you know, like that? Maybe it would. Well, actually, if you had something this size, okay, it's back to front. Something this size that was antimatter, and you brought it together with something this size that was matter, what would be? I mean, what's the weight of this? I don't know. I'll have to do some calculations, but I think if these two were matter and antimatter and were brought together, that the consequences would be pretty profound. Anyway, so that's how I'm thinking about, losing my balance. That's what happens when you get older. So how I'm thinking about looking at this as progress, is that I am going to move into the realm of antimatter for my next publication.